And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, March 11th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So a lot of football stuff to break. So we are going to start off the show by talking about a couple of quarterback changes. We'll talk about Sam Darnold signing a deal with the Seattle Seahawks to be their starting quarterback in 2025. And we'll talk about what happened over the weekend, and that is the Seahawks trading Geno Smith to the Raiders. Then in the second part of the show, we will talk about a couple of things regarding the Buffalo Bills. So Josh Allen received the contract extension, and they also released Von Miller. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about some of the moves that the Bears made. They improved their offensive line and their defensive line, which, talking about the offensive line, that was really something that they had to attack this offseason, and they have done more than enough to try to improve this offensive line and protect Caleb Williams. So we'll get into that as well. We will talk about Justin Fields signing with the New York Jets to be their starting quarterback for 2025. And now, what does that mean for the Steelers? And then in the final part of the show, I will continue my season overviews. Today we will be covering the Detroit Lions. So, with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks and Geno Smith being traded to the Raiders. So, the Geno Smith trade happened over the weekend. I was definitely a little surprised by that. I didn't see that coming. That was one move that I did not see coming. And if you remember when I was doing my quarterback predictions and where I thought guys were going to sign, well, so far I have not gotten a single one right. Because of what happened with Geno, that opened up a spot for one of these quarterbacks, and it led to Sam Darnold ultimately going there. But Geno Smith ended up getting traded, and that led to Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks. And he signed a 3-year, $100.5 million contract with $55 million guaranteed. Now, I think he would have made... Actually, he's also... Yeah, okay, we just said that. Yeah, so last year, only made a contract for $10 million with the Vikings. And maybe missed out on getting a little bit more because of what happened the final 2 games of the regular season with the Vikings, but I did say this. Sam Darnold, deserved to get paid based off of the season that he had. Like I said, I thought maybe he was going to end up back in Minnesota, but that ended up not being the case. He goes to Seattle, and Seattle's kind of in a rebuild, but they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily a full-on rebuild, right? Because you still have a lot of talent on this team. You still got decent running backs with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And now, with DK Metcalf getting traded and Tyler Lockett getting released, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the guy. So, there is talent on this team. Now, it's not like the situation in Minnesota, right? So, I do think Sam Darnold, I think this is a good spot for him. I don't think he's going to put up the same numbers like he did in Minnesota. I think you could see, some regression there. But I do think with having that running game, and you do have a young, up-and-coming number 1 wide receiver, you would hope, Smith-Njigba takes that next step, that Darnold could have a good year. And the Seahawks can be competitive. I mean, look at what they were last year with Geno Smith at quarterback. And the Seahawks have been decent with Geno Smith these last couple of years at quarterback, these last few years. I can't believe it already. He's been their starter for 3 years since they traded Russ. But, I think they could do the same thing with Darnold. But I do think they need to add another weapon. I think you could also the offensive line. I know many people online were saying that was an issue, so that's an area that needs improvement. But you look at the NFC West right now, and you see all the moves that the 49ers have made recently. They've gotten rid of a lot of guys to clear up cap space, so they're going to need to reload. The Cardinals, um, they had a disappointing end to their season. And then you got the Rams, who just won the division, but I think they're probably the best team right now. This division, it's definitely something the Seahawks can take advantage of. And, they did they split with the 49ers. So, they did get swept by the Rams, but, it's the final game of the regular season, at that point, it doesn't really matter. The Seahawks were already out of the playoffs. But, you know what? I think the Seahawks are a team that could compete for a playoff spot. That's really what I'm trying to say with Sam Darnold. Now, you do worry with this contract. You're taking a bit of a gamble because what happens if Sam Darnold doesn't perform? Could the Seahawks maybe take a quarterback in the later rounds and have him sit behind Darnold? They could. They could do that. But we'll have to wait and see. But with Darnold going there, how did that happen? Well, Geno Smith ended up getting traded over the weekend. And it's interesting because supposedly the Seahawks, wanted to bring him back. And they were going to pay him. And I guess, things didn't work out and Geno wanted to get traded. And they ended up trading him to Las Vegas to reunite with Pete Carroll. And, the Seahawks ended up getting a draft pick out of it. And look, Geno Smith, he did do a nice job, these last few years at quarterback for the Seahawks. But he was definitely inconsistent at times. And, compared to the first year when he was the full-time starter, the numbers kind of went down. And the interceptions went up, the touchdowns went down. His first year with Seattle, he had 30 touchdowns to 11 picks. And he passed for over 4,000 yards. And that was a solid year. But then 2023 kind of took a little bit of a step back. Had 20 touchdowns to 9 picks, 3,600 yards passing. But did have a career high in passing yards in 2024. 21 touchdowns to 15 picks, though. A lot of picks. And also, red zone turnovers were a problem for him as well. So, he goes to Vegas. He brings stability over to that position, right? The Raiders, you look at how their quarterback position has been, their quarterback play has been over the last few years. It has not been great since Derek Carr left. And Aiden O'Connell has probably been the best out of what they've had since Derek Carr. But you needed to upgrade at that position. Jimmy Garoppolo was not it. Gardner Minshew, he was not good with the Raiders. Getting Geno Smith, you do have some stability there, and he could definitely win you some games. The Raiders, how many games they win? 4? They could definitely improve on that in 2025. But you are playing in a division where you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Justin Herbert, and you have Bo Nix and the Broncos, and all 3 of those teams made the playoffs. So, the odds are kind of stacked up against them. But you got Pete Carroll there now. And, you got Tom Brady, who is, got his fingerprints on this organization now. So, we'll see what happens. But there's a lot that needs to improve with this Raiders team. They were not good at running the football. And they needed to upgrade a quarterback. And I think Geno will give them better quarterback play, but he's also going to have some moments where he might be turning the ball over, things like that, but they need to get more weapons on this team as well to go along with Brock Bowers. You got Jacoby Myers there, Trey Tucker as well, but you need more help with the receiver position. which I think could be addressed in the draft. Maybe they bring in an old friend in Tyler Lockett. They bring him over to at least, provide a veteran presence in that receiver room. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the Raiders. But with what Pete Carroll said, he wanted this team to be competitive in year one. He doesn't want to take a long time to rebuild because, you can't really do that with Pete Carroll. Because Pete Carroll is, he's an older head coach. I think he's the oldest head coach in the NFL, right? So, you want to get this thing rolling. So, you got Geno Smith there. I'm not saying the Raiders are going to be a playoff team. Not even close to a playoff team right now. But you do have some stability at the quarterback position now with Geno being there. So, I'm okay with it for the Raiders just because it is an upgrade. And, for the for the Seahawks, bringing in Darnold, let's see what kind of an encore performance he puts on. I think you need to bring in more pass catchers, similar to the Raiders, but, at least with the Seahawks, they do have a sure number one wide receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's going to be the number one going into the season. I guess you could say Jacoby Myers is the number one for the Raiders, but Jackson Smith-Njigba has more upside. So, yeah, I really don't have an issue with the Seahawks bringing in Darnold. That was a position they needed to address, right? And this quarterback class is not loaded, so it's not really like you're missing out on, the top guys. I guess maybe if the Seahawks were not good and they were there, maybe you could see a scenario. Maybe you see a scenario anyways when they could trade up, at some point in the draft and maybe get a guy in the later rounds. I could definitely see them taking a quarterback somewhere. They do have Sam Howell still, but, I said it was a possibility he could push Geno Smith for the starting job, and that did not happen. So I don't know what his future holds, but Sam Darnold will be the starter, and, I like the move for the Seahawks. Let's see what happens. Is he an upgrade over Geno Smith? I think so, based off of, last year. But let's see what happens now in 2025. So we are going to take our first break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will talk about Josh Allen and his contract extension, as well as talking about Von Miller getting released and what could potentially happen there. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about a couple of things regarding the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen and his contract extension, as well as talking about Von Miller being released and what could potentially happen there. So, with all the craziness, couldn't even get to Josh Allen's extension yesterday. And you figure more stuff is going to happen. There's currently stuff going on. I just saw that the Texans traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So, some veteran guys in the Eagles secondary being moved. We saw Darius Slay sign with the Steelers yesterday, so they just traded him. And the Giants actually made a move this morning. They signed Javon Holland, safety, so that was a position they needed. They signed a corner yesterday from the Saints, so they made some moves. But yeah, we still got some moves going on, and yeah, we're still waiting on some of the quarterbacks and where they're going to go. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, and I think we have some sort of an idea, but we'll see. But let's get to this quarterback. So Josh Allen, amongst the craziness, Josh Allen received a record-setting 6-year, $330 million extension. And this includes $250 million guaranteed, which is the largest guaranteed ever given to an NFL player. Now, once again, I'm going to say it. This will probably last for a year, and then we'll see somebody else get a deal that is the largest guarantee ever. So this will take Allen through the 2030 season. He has 4 years left on his current deal. He will now be with the team through the 2030 season. And it'll carry, or this contract, Allen will carry an annual AAV of $55 million per year, which is now among the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, and the only one that is paid more is Dak Prescott. And he passes Deshaun Watson in terms of guaranteed money, and this is worth more than Patrick Mahomes' contract. So, there could be some restructures down the line, but if there was a year to give Josh Allen a contract, it makes sense it's this one, coming off of an MVP year. The Bills were once again in the AFC Championship game. This was a very good year for Josh Allen. And the thing you do worry about with these contracts, what kind of flexibility does it give this team? But the Bills did pay a lot of their guys. They paid Greg Rousseau. They paid Khalil Shakir, right? So they've kind of been spending money on their own guys. Now, they have cleared some cap space. They did release Von Miller, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But, they worked on their home guys. And, Josh Allen, hopefully at some point he breaks through and they can get to a Super Bowl, the Bills, and win one, because I do think, with all the quarterbacks we have now, he's one of the guys that deserves a ring. He does. And we finally saw someone from this current era win a Super Bowl, and that was Jalen Hurts with the Eagles in this Mahomes era. We saw Jalen Hurts break through, and him and his team, the Eagles, they won a Super Bowl. So now that was a team on the NFC side. We need to see a team from the AFC side knock off the Chiefs and get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. Because we have seen it a couple of times. Well, we saw Brady do it, but that's the last era. And when Burrow did it, Burrow didn't win. So, and the thing is, with these salaries and with the salary cap going up, the salaries are only going to go up. So for the Bills, you might as well get ahead of it. Pay Josh Allen, even though he's got a lot of years left on his current deal. And then, that becomes, in the long term, you could rework that extension and, create more flexibility for your team and bring in more assets. The Bills did bring in Joshua Palmer. He used to be a receiver for the Chargers. He's a deep ball guy. Not a big name, but they bring him in because I guess now he is, well, not really I guess, but he is the Mac Hollins replacement, because now Mac Hollins, who led the team in touchdown receptions last season, he now goes to the Patriots. So he's basically the Mac Hollins replacement there. So you got Khalil Shakir, you got Joshua Palmer, you got Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and then, of course, you have James Cook. And we'll see what happens with him because he wants to get paid. That's your offense right now. I would like to see the Bills, maybe add someone else. I mean, maybe they draft a receiver at some point. Who knows? But I think they're banking on Keon Coleman taking a bigger step in 2025. And if that happens, then forget what I say. But they paid Khalil Shakir, who's a good player. You're hoping the tight ends could stay healthy. You got James Cook. And look, Josh Allen has really shown no signs of decline. This was arguably his best year. And you look at the supporting cast, the guys that I just named, and you're like, none of those guys are. I mean, James Cook, when it comes to the running backs, that's a different story. But when you look at the receivers, these guys don't even come close to, top 15. Top 15. Well, Khalil Shakir is the best receiver of the group. But where would you rank Khalil Shakir? Like, I don't even know. I mean, I don't want to name receivers and start ranking them, but these aren't top 10, top 15 guys. That's really what I'm trying to say. But Josh Allen is a top 5 quarterback, and he's able to make it work with what he has. Like I said, Matt Collins was the leading receiver in touchdown receptions last year. Matt Collins. So they'll be fine. But, congratulations to Josh Allen for getting this deal. Coming off of one of his best years, like I said. And then I did want to talk about Von Miller briefly. So, but one quick thing, just to go over Josh Allen's stats again from last year. He threw for 28 touchdown passes. He had 12 rushing touchdowns on the season. And he's also the first player in league history to have at least 25 touchdown passes, 10 rushing touchdowns, and throw fewer than 10 interceptions in a single season. That's another thing. Did a great job at not turning the ball over. And then he threw for 3,700 yards. He's come a long way. Because when he first broke into the league, turnovers were a problem. He was a bit of a project, but look at what he is now. Like I said, he's come a long way. But the Bills did release Von Miller to save some cap space. They save about $8.5 million of cap space. In 13 games last year with the Bills, Von Miller had 6 sacks, 17 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 32 total pressures. It's not the same player he once was, of course, with the Broncos, but I think he's a guy that could still help out a team. There's potentially a chance that the Bills could bring him back, but he could go elsewhere. He did serve a 4-game suspension for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy with the accusations of domestic violence. But he was never charged, but the league still investigated the incidents. So, there was that. And they released him 2 years after signing a 6-year, $120 million contract when he was a free agent after winning the Super Bowl with the Rams. But we'll see what happens if they do bring him back. But he's not the same player, and I think if he wants to go to a contender, I think there'd be teams maybe potentially interested. I don't know what his market would be. But like I said, he could end up going back to the Bills. That's a possibility there. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But, he's 36 now. So, not getting any younger. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about with the Bills. Josh Allen getting that extension. It's so much stuff going on right now. There's signings all over the place and trades. I mean, this is the offseason. Even in the offseason, the NFL still is number one. We're getting closer to March Madness and, NBA playoffs and Stanley Cup playoffs is coming up. But the NFL, even when the season is over, they still make headlines. That's why when the draft comes around, you got that, the schedule release. It's unbelievable. And there's still more that needs to be figured out with this team or with some of these players that are still available. Because we still got Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers still out there. There could be trades that we don't see coming. Like the Commanders, they traded a bunch of picks to get Laremy Tunsil to be their left tackle next year. And some people might have said they might have gave up too much, but you know what? Commanders, go and do that. This is coming from a Giant fan. You feel like that Laremy Tunsil can improve your team, improve the offensive line for your team, you go out and do that. And that's what they did. So, yeah. Well, actually, we want to go back to this. So, before we go to break, our next break, I just want to remind you guys, once again, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, when we come back from our next break, we will talk about another team, really like what they've done, and that is the Chicago Bears. They have improved the offensive line, and they have also added to their defensive line as well. So we will get into all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about what the Bears did, but we do have some breaking news. So, according to Ian Rappaport, Daniel Jones is expected to sign with the Indianapolis Colts on a one-year deal. The Colts have been a team that they were looking to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson. And that was a potential fit. Because I don't know, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, those Justin Fields, those guys want to actually start. And, I guess they weren't going to be an option. But Daniel Jones is the guy. So they bring him in, and he's going to be they're going to bring him in. He's going to be competition for Anthony Richardson. So we'll see how that plays out. But, it was either that or he was going to go back to the Vikings. It was one or the other, but he goes to the Colts. And now with the Vikings, it's J.J. McCarthy. Or do we see Aaron Rodgers fulfill the prophecy, and now he goes to the Vikings? We'll see what happens. But let's get into the other team I wanted to talk about from the same division with the Vikings. But that is the Chicago Bears. So the Bears, I love what they've done this offseason so far. I really do, because they have addressed the offensive line. The offensive line was a huge problem last year, and they have signed 3 new starters on the interior. Tackles are still the same, but on the interior, they have 3 new starters. They signed Drew Dalman from, I think he was from the Falcons, to go along with, the center from the Falcons, and he started 40 games over the last 3 seasons. He has a 95.1% pass block win rate in 2024, which is 9th among centers with at least 500 snaps, to go along with 10 pressures allowed. And the risk with that is he was a little bit banged up last year, dealt with an ankle injury. But again, that's a position that they needed, so that could work out. And then on top of that, the Bears, they did also go out and they traded for Joe Thuney, who's been on the Chiefs' offensive line the last few years, and now he goes back to his natural position, so that's an upgrade. And then they also got Jonah Jackson from the Rams, and they gave up a 6th-round pick. So I love what they've done. And then on top of that, they went out and, speaking of the Falcons, Grady Jarrett, who got cut, they bring him in. Might have been a bit of an overpay because he is an older player, but 3 years, $43.5 million. I mean, I guess maybe the years is what I'm a little standoffish with. But they bring him in. They put him on the defensive line. And then they also signed Dayo Odenigbo from the Colts. I hope that's how I pronounce it. For 3 years, $48 million with $32 million guaranteed. And he's a young player. So what I've been reading is the Bears are hoping that they can unlock his true potential. And this is the guy that they bring in opposite of Montez Sweat. He's going to be 26. And, we'll see what happens with that. But like I said, I love what the Bears have done. I think that they are going to be one of the most improved teams going into next season. I really do believe that. Because I think with Ben Johnson now, you got an offensive-minded head coach. I think this offense can take the next step. We'll see what they do in the draft. I know that there were some experts saying maybe they go and they draft Aston Genty to be the running back. I mean, DeAndre Swift was okay for them last year, but if you bring in Genty and you have him and Swift, it's kind of like what Ben Johnson had over in Detroit with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's familiar with Swift. So, yeah, I mean, I would be okay with that because they don't really... I mean, they could add to their defense. They've improved their offensive line. I mean, you go into the draft, I mean, you could draft best player available. I mean, maybe they do draft a tackle or something because you have the quarterback. You got Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. You got Cole Kmet. Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they end up doing. But talking about some of the other things with the guys they've signed. So Odenigbo had 16.5 sacks in 4 seasons with the Colts. He had 4 last season. But yeah, he's still just 25. So they've improved the trenches with their defensive line and especially their offensive line. So I'm curious to see what they end up doing the rest of the way. But, we saw how bad the Bears' offensive line was last year. Caleb Williams, it was rough to watch at times. And he was getting hit too many times. And you do not want him to become, the next Andrew Luck. And I've said that about, other guys as well. You don't want these young quarterbacks to be taking hits. Because, yeah, they can deal with it now because they're still young. But as you get older, you're not going to be able to bounce back from those hits as easily. Now, some of it was Caleb Williams' fault because, he'd hold on to the ball too long and he would run into a couple of sacks. Well, I think more than just a couple. And I remember on Thanksgiving, when he's running to the sidelines and, he gets hit out of bounds and just the way that he got hit, you thought it was going to be worse than it actually was. And I think he will improve on that. I think you have a whole offseason here that you are going to work on that. So when we get to next year, it won't be a problem. And I think Ben Johnson is going to help Caleb Williams out there. But you give him better protection, we see what he could do. Extending the play, showing off the arm talent. He's going to have a better year. He is definitely going to have a better year. New system, better protection, and you got the weapons. So now we just got to hope that the Bears, their defense, once they got rid of Matt Eberflus, the defense really just fell apart. Because the defense was not the problem last year. But once they actually let go of Matt Eberflus, then the defense fell apart, those few games against the Lions, the Niners, and the Vikings. So, now next year, let's see what happens. This is the best division in football, though, the NFC North. It's really going to be fascinating to see how this division is. Again, because if the Bears are competitive, it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight. But this was the biggest area that needed to be addressed for the Bears, and they've done more than enough. Now, the guys got to end up playing well. Like, the injuries could happen, and then everything I say goes out the window. But, Ryan Poles at least gone out and addressed this area. So, I did want to bring up Daniel Jones again. So, 1-year contract for $14 million. That's the specifics there. So, we will see. We will see how that plays out. But, there's a lot of teams. We'll go over what teams, the offseasons I like. The Bears I liked especially. The Patriots made a lot of moves on defense, which I think, for them, they got to make some moves on offense. They did bring in Matt Collins, but they do need to improve there, and maybe, through the draft, that's what they end up doing. But, the Patriots did make a lot of moves. They improved in, all their areas. And we did receive a follow from, I don't know how to, Mommy Yesmer? I don't know how to, thank you for the follow. We appreciate that. Let me know what you guys think, though, about the Bears and the offseason that they've had, because they have really improved a key area for them. But to kind of go through some of the other moves as well, not going to go through everything, but we did talk about Daniel Jones. C.J. Gardner-Johnson got traded. The Vikings, they signed Jonathan Allen. They re-signed Byron Murphy. They also signed Javon Hargrave as well, so they added to their defensive line. The 49ers did release Kyle Juszczyk. Najee Harris ended up signing a 1-year deal with the Chargers, so he's going to be the replacement for J.K. Dobbins. They also did release Gus Edwards, so you got Najee Harris there now. The Saints did re-sign Chase Young. The Broncos signed a couple of 49ers players. They signed Dre Greenlaw and Ufanga. The Cowboys, they ended up signing running back Javonte Williams. So we'll get into some of these at some point, because there's just, again, a lot going on. Kenny Pickett ended up getting traded from the Eagles to the Browns, so it's possible we could end up seeing him start some games for the Browns next year. Charvarius Ward signed with the Colts. The Colts made a couple of moves for their secondary. They signed him, and they also signed Cam Bynum from the Vikings. DJ Reed, we'll get into that in the final segment where he ended up signing. Josh Sweat ended up signing with the Cardinals. That was a good signing for him. So I'm going to say this right now. I feel like the Eagles might end up with Trey Hendrickson, because they were in on Myles Garrett, right? And now you lost, Milton Williams ended up signing with the Eagles, and Josh Sweat signing with the Cardinals, like I said. But I feel like I think we could say Trey Hendrickson get traded to the Eagles. I feel like we could see that. Because now with Myles Garrett re-signing with the Browns, now everybody's going to be looking to try to get Trey Hendrickson. So it would not surprise me if the Eagles end up with him. So we'll keep an eye on that. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we will talk about another quarterback that signed, and that is Justin Fields. He signed with the New York Jets, so we will talk about that signing, whether I like it, whether I don't like it. That is what we will get into when we come back from our next break. So, with that being said, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are now going to talk about Justin Fields and where he ended up. So, interesting. Coming down to the Steelers and the Jets. And he ends up going to the Jets on a 2-year deal. I'll get the specifics of the deal in a second. But I said I thought he was going back to Pittsburgh. You know, and it felt like it was going to happen. But then free agency started, and then as we moved along, it seemed like maybe it wasn't a guarantee. And yeah, that ended up being the case because he goes to the Jets. He signs a 2-year deal. The contract will be $40 million, including $30 million guaranteed. And with the Steelers, last season, completed 65.8% of his passes. He had 1,106 passing yards, 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, 289 yards rushing, averaged 4.7 yards per carry with 5 rushing touchdowns, and the Steelers were 4-2. And I did bring this up, but money was a factor, and also I think it's just maybe he felt a little bit of disrespect. Because the Steelers were winning games, they had a winning record with him, and they still went back to Russell Wilson. And it looked like, hey, you know, I guess that was the right move. But then the Steelers ended up losing 5 straight games, and they never thought to themselves, let's go back to Fields. And let's see if Fields could change it up. Let's try to change it up. Because, you know, you go back to 2023, you had Kenny Pickett, he gets hurt, Mitchell Trubisky comes in, and they pulled the plug on him, and they had no problem putting in Mason Rudolph. So why you started out 4-2 with Justin Fields? Why didn't you go back to him and try to change things up when you're losing games? You know, the Steelers are lucky that they went on that winning streak with Russ because, you know, they could have missed out on the playoffs. So I don't know why they didn't do that. So maybe he felt disrespected there, and maybe if the Steelers were to bring him back, maybe he felt like they could bring in competition, and it wouldn't be guaranteed that he would have the starting job the whole year. With the Jets, you have that. And now with the Jets, with their first pick is right, they're picking at 7. I don't know if they're going to take. They're probably not going to take a quarterback unless you see, you know, one of these guys fall to the 7th pick. But I think for the Jets, you're looking to draft best player available. You're maybe looking to, you know, draft a receiver opposite of Garrett Wilson, maybe. Maybe you're looking at taking one of the tight ends because Tyler Conklin's not coming back. Maybe you want to take one of these young tight ends. They had an opportunity to take Brock Bowers last year, and they ended up taking Fashanu, which ended up being the better choice because, you know, you signed Tyron Smith, and, you know, you ended up having injuries to the offensive line throughout the year. So that ended up being the right pick there. So I don't know what the Jets are going to do. I think you take best player available if you're the Jets. Maybe you look to take a quarterback, you know, in the later rounds, but that's not an area of need at the moment. They could do a lot of different things with that pick. They could trade down, who knows. But do I like this for the Jets? I do. I do like this for the Jets. I don't think you should have I don't think you could go into next year with Tyrod Taylor being your starter. Absolutely not. Like, if you were to they move off of Aaron Rodgers and you let Tyrod Taylor start the whole season, that would be a head scratcher for me. But with Justin Fields, that, you know, at least if you're a Jet fan, you can go into the season, you know, having some kind of optimism, I guess, going in. I mean, I know with the Jets, optimism is a strange word. Well, it's the same thing for both New York teams right now. Now we got to see what the other New York team decides to do with their quarterback situation. But with Justin Fields, I think he could definitely win you some games. I don't expect the Jets to be a playoff team next year, nothing like that. But I think they could definitely win some games with Fields. And it's going to be a different kind of approach with this iteration of this offense. Because, now you go from Aaron Rodgers, who, is part of a dying breed, a pure pocket passer. Well, not pure pocket passer, because he obviously was able to make plays, by scrambling around a little bit. But, and now Aaron Rodgers is not that same player. So it's not going to be, Fields is going to drop back and throw it, 40 times. Justin Fields is going to run the football. That's part of his game. And the Jets are going to become, a different team. They are going to be a run-heavy team. And they have a good assortment of running backs with Breece Hall and Davis and Braylon Allen. So there's going to be an emphasis on running the football. And then, of course, you're going to see Fields take some shots downfield to Garrett Wilson. There's familiarity there because they were teammates at Ohio State. They need to get another threat at wide receiver, but I like it. I like it. Now, I don't think Justin Fields is going to be the answer, the long-term answer. I mean, we still don't know his full potential just yet, right? I mean, I felt like he should have stayed in Pittsburgh, but I do understand, from his perspective, if he felt like, I'm not guaranteed a starting job here. I don't blame him for going somewhere where he's the, guaranteed, like, hey, you're the guy. I really don't blame him for that. But, the way the Jets have been over the years, maybe staying in Pittsburgh wouldn't have been so bad. I don't know. But you know what? It's a new regime. I like what I hear from Aaron Glenn, but now you got to go out there and show it on the football field. What kind of identity is this team going to have going in? I think they're definitely going to be more disciplined. He seems like a guy that's going to be all disciplined. So you hope that that's going to be the case. But only time will tell. But yeah, I'm happy that the Jets, they went out and they got a legit starter. Because Justin Fields is a guy that can start. And Tyrod can start too, but he's a backup. Tyrod Taylor's a backup quarterback. To me, I think Fields, he's got that starter potential there. So, like I said, I don't expect playoffs. You're still playing in the division with the Bills. You figure the Dolphins are going to be better next year, if Tua could stay healthy. Although there was a video that I saw on social media of people talking about, Tua, he was on a boat, and he looked like he was out of shape. And people are like, oh, what's going on there? Well, look, it's the offseason. As long as he is in shape when we get to the season and he can stay healthy, you're okay with that. But yeah, they got the main thing for the Dolphins is they got to keep Tua healthy. Because if Tua stayed healthy last year, I think they make the playoffs. And then, you got the Patriots who have been making a lot of moves. Now you got Mike Vrabel as the head coach. And, Drake May, it looks like he's the guy in New England. I think they're going to be an improved team this year. So, yeah, I mean, right now you're looking at the Jets as, being at the bottom, in my opinion. But who knows? They could surprise you. They could definitely do that. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Fields signing by the Jets. What do you think about that? Now that leaves Pittsburgh with an opening at quarterback. You still got Russell Wilson out there that you could bring back, and you could throw moon balls to DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Or do you bring in Aaron Rodgers? Now, it didn't seem like that was going to be a likely thing with Aaron Rodgers, but now look at what's happened. Look at what's happened. It's either going to be Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. And you could say the same thing about the Giants, too. It's either going to be one of those two guys, in my opinion. So we will keep an eye on that. we await, because those are some big names that are out there. But we will have to wait and see. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about the Fields deal. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Lions. I will continue my season overviews. We will talk about the Lions and their season, what they got to do. What are some areas that they can maybe address or already have addressed. And what could potentially happen in the draft, things like that. We will get into all that when we come back from our final break of the show. So we have talked about the NFC North a bit today. We talked about the Bears. We also talked a little bit about the Vikings because, they made some signings. And they did also lose Daniel Jones to the Colts. They've also lost Sam Darnold. So it could be the J.J. McCarthy show. So, we will talk about the Lions when we come back. So for one final time today, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to do a season overview on the Detroit Lions and what they have to do this offseason. And so far, they have made moves. They signed cornerback DJ Reed from the Jets. They did lose Carlton Davis to the Patriots, so they bring in DJ Reed. And they re-signed some guys. They re-signed Marcus Davenport on the defensive line. They also re-signed Derek Barnes as well. But I think the biggest thing from this offseason is they lost Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And, how is the coaching staff going to turn out next year? Are the Lions going to regress? Because they had a very good season. And this was a team that I picked to go to the Super Bowl before the year started. I think I had them at 13 wins, I want to say. So I had them winning the NFC North, but they ended up winning 15 games. The only two games that they ended up losing in the regular season was to Tampa, and then they lost 48-42 to the Bills. So those were two. Well, the Bills, they were playing from behind the entire game, but the Bucs was a game they definitely could have won late, but they ended up losing that. But what really hurt the Lions was injuries. They dealt with a ton of injuries, particularly on defense. You had Aiden Hutchinson going down early on in the year, that horrific leg injury against the Cowboys. You had Anzalone going down. You had Derek Barnes ended up getting hurt. There was just a ton of guys on defense. And once we got to the playoffs and they went up against the Commanders, it was just too much for them to overcome. And then also people speculated that Jared Goff was playing with a concussion for most of the game after he took that hit from, I think it was from Frankie Louvu on the interception, the pick six. And Goff did not have a good playoff game when it came to the turnovers. He did throw for over 300 yards, but yeah, three interceptions, and then he also fumbled the ball too. Not good. But all year you thought this was the best team in the NFC, with the Eagles right behind them. And I really wanted to see what would have happened had the Eagles and the Lions matched up against each other in the playoffs. If both teams are healthy, I would have loved to have seen that, but we never got it. Jared Goff did put together a very good season. 4,600 yards, 37 touchdowns to 12 picks. The running game between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery combined, they had 28 rushing touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had 16. David Montgomery had 12. He did get hurt, but he came back for the playoff game against the Commanders. Jahmyr Gibbs had 1,400 yards rushing. David Montgomery had 775. And then with the receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to be one of the best receivers in the NFL. 1,263 receiving yards. He had 12 receiving touchdowns on the year. Jamison Williams had over 1,000 yards. Well, barely over 1,000. He had 1,001 receiving yards. Had 7 receiving touchdowns. He did take that next step and became that second receiver behind St. Brown, which is something we talked about going into the year last year, that, he was a guy that needed to step up. Sam Laporta only had 726 receiving yards. What did he have his rookie year? He had his rookie season, he ended up having 889 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. So the numbers were down a little bit. Had 7 touchdowns as opposed to 10 from his rookie season, and had 726 receiving yards, like I said. Jahmyr Gibbs also had 4 receiving touchdowns. Tim Patrick also, as kind of like that third option amongst the pass catchers. He made some plays for them in 2024. He had 3 receiving touchdowns. But yeah, the defense, took a major hit due to injury. But, it didn't matter in the regular season. The Lions just kept winning games, and that final game against the Vikings, it was going to be tough. But they ended up winning that game 31-9. It was close for a while, but, the Lions ended up pulling away because the Vikings just could not score. But, some of their wins, they beat up on some teams. They beat up on the Cowboys. When Aiden Hutchinson got hurt, they beat up on the Cowboys because you remember, in 2023, there was that whole thing with them going for 2, and, they said that the tackle didn't report eligible, so, the 2-point conversion ended up not counting, and then they went for it again and didn't get it. But the Lions made sure they circled that on the calendar, and they really beat up on the Cowboys. A lot of teams beat up on the Cowboys in 2024 early on. But you also had in Week 1, we had a rematch of the wild card game from the previous year against the Rams, and this was another good game. Lions won in overtime 26-20. David Montgomery scored the game-winning touchdown. Like I said, they lost to Tampa. But then they really got on a roll and didn't lose until they played Buffalo in December. But, you had that epic game against the Vikings. Jake Bates kicking the game-winning field goal. The Vikings were up 10-0, and then the Lions, they went on to score, what was it? Was it 21 unanswered, or they ended up scoring? They scored 21 unanswered points. Vikings ended up taking the lead late because Montgomery fumbled, and they returned it for a touchdown, the Vikings did. But, yeah, the Lions ended up winning that, and they never gave the division back. Also, another signature win for them was that game against the Texans on that Sunday night. Jared Goff had 5 interceptions in that game, and they were down 23-7 going into the half. And despite all that, they came back, won that game. Jake Bates kicked 2 50-yard field goals, a 58-yarder and a 52-yarder, and they were very close to not being good. But they ended up winning that, and that was a big win for them on that Sunday night. But yeah, they beat up on Jacksonville. They won 52-6. They won 52-14 against the Titans. A couple of nail biters. On Thanksgiving, you had that game against the Bears with the mismanagement of the clock, and then against the Packers, they won on a last-second Jake Bates field goal. That was when they went for it, and on 4th down. and it looked like they weren't going to get it, but Montgomery picked it up. But yeah, they won 34-31 over the Packers. Yeah, got into a shootout with the Bills. Well, they were playing keep up or catch up, and this is when I remember saying this on the football podcast. But Jared Goff and the Lions, they won a game where he threw 5 interceptions. They lost a game where he didn't turn the ball over once. He had almost 500 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. And they lost 48-42. And that's because Josh Allen had, I think he had, how many touchdowns did Josh Allen have in this game? He had 4 total touchdowns. He had 2 passing and 2 rushing. And the Bills ran the ball for almost 200 yards in the game. So, yeah. But they won the NFC Championship game rematch with the 49ers. They won 40-34. That was on that Monday night. And then, yeah, won the division. But, yeah, you got to the playoffs. The injuries really caught up with them. The Commanders, gave the Lions a taste of their own medicine by going for it on 4th down. Jaden Daniels played really well in that game. Jared Goff, like I said, was playing with a concussion, many people assume, after the Frankie Louvu hit. And it was just a disappointing end to their season. And this was a year that you thought maybe they were going to go all the way. And I don't know. I think if they would have went up against the Eagles, I think they probably would have lost. But we'll see what happens if they open up against the Eagles first game of the year, because they do play in Philly. And I think, if the NFL wants to get the year started with the bang, maybe you have the Lions go up against them. But, yeah, the Lions will be picking at 28 in the first round. So, yeah, they got a first rounder, second rounder, third rounder, fourth rounder, 6th round pick. And I think they have 2 7s. So, and then in terms of, what they need, I mean, I think they could go defensive heavy, maybe. I mean, right now, they signed DJ Reed. That was their big signing. But, running back, they're fine. I mean, quarterback, they're fine, obviously. Tight end. Receiver maybe is something they could do in the later rounds. But I think for the Lions, this will be a defensive-heavy draft. I could be wrong on that, but that's just kind of how I feel. Maybe they're a team that goes after Trey Hendrickson, because I think they were also looking at Myles Garrett and trying to maybe pair him up with Aiden Hutchinson. And looking at the Lions' cap situation, go to overthecap.com. So the Lions right now with their salary cap, and I don't know, is this with the this might be before the DJ Reed signing, but they have $52 million in cap space. So, they could definitely make some more moves. I mean, like I said, I think defense is going to be what they do. But my biggest thing going into the season is, how is the coaching staff going to be without Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson? Is this offense going to take a step back? We'll see. But they still got all the guys there on offense. Really didn't lose any key guys. I mean, like I said, they lost Carlton Davis, but they replaced him with DJ Reed. So, in terms of the personnel on the field, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I right now I still look at them as the best team in the North, and they could definitely be overthrown. But I still look at them as the best team. So that is pretty much it. We will have to keep an eye on what happens the rest of the day here. Still a lot of moves that will be made. Still some quarterbacks out there. Aaron Rodgers could be signed by the Steelers. I think that's the most likely thing. And then Russell Wilson, I think, is going to end up going to the Giants, because the Giants want to bring in a veteran. So it's funny how quick things change. We hear that, Art Stapleton, who's a Giants beat writer, he goes on the Pat McAfee show and says that the Giants and Aaron Rodgers are in deep negotiations. And now all of a sudden, oh yeah, he might be going to the Steelers. So it just goes to show you that we don't know anything. But There's rumors out there that the Giants and the Steelers both have offers on the table, but yeah, I think Rodgers probably is going to end up going to the Steelers because that's a better chance for him to win as opposed to going to the Giants. So we will see what happens. We will see what happens. And if we get news as soon as today, we'll talk about it. But there's more stuff we'll get into tomorrow because, I wanted to also talk about the Buccaneers, a couple of their signings. They brought back Chris Godwin, so I wanted to get into that. There's going to be more things that happen throughout the day, and we'll cover it tomorrow. There's also some baseball stuff I wanted to get into with the season a couple weeks away. So we will get into all that at some point. But I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to subscribe to both YouTube channels. I appreciated the follow that we got today during the show, even though the username I really couldn't pronounce the whole name. But appreciated the follow. Make sure to like and leave a comment on the videos. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.